All right. Well, thank you very much for coming to this session just before lunch. The previous one ran a bit late, so we're going to make it going to be very short. Let me introduce you to Luis Columbus, who is a contributor at Forbes, and he will moderate this panel session.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you all for taking time from lunch. I appreciate it, and strive to make this as informative and valuable as possible. You could always get in touch with me with any additional questions via Forbes as well. But to begin with, let's just start out with a really clear definition of what omni-channel commerce is. And it is the orchestrating of marketing and sales functions across all the different experiences that you could deliver to a given customer. It's the orchestration of all these different elements together to deliver excellent experiences. And so with that precept in mind, what I'd like to do is, first of all, introduce each one of the members of our team. And just Neil Bellstock was the engagement manager with Amine Solutions, and you want to just go ahead and briefly introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, well, I'm Neil Bellstock, again, engagement manager at Amine Solutions. We do systems integrations and implementations for CPQ solutions. I'm currently working with a global software company to implement Apttus CPQ.
Great, welcome.
Hello, my name is Frank Sohn. I'm the founder of Novo CPQ Consulting, a vendor agnostic consulting firm. I've worked in CPQ for the last 20 years, and we do different kinds of CPQ consulting services.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is John Narbites. I'm the Vice President of Commercial Sales for North America at Prism. At Prism, we are the operating system for collaboration. So we provide a digital workplace that lets teams connect so they can make decisions quickly and they can see results in their business even more quickly.
Excellent. Thank you all for coming. And so let's start out with the first question. What does omnichannel really mean? You know, I threw out an initial definition, but it's always great to hear from people in the field putting these things in place for customers. And let's start out, with you and with your work.
Yeah. Well, really, what Omnichannel really is trying to do is to simplify the sales experience across all the different sales channels. So you've got partners, inside sales, customers, and how do you want to implement your quoting tools, your sales tools, so that it's consistent and complete across the different channels. So you're not having to create stovepipe and siloed versions of your products and of your marketing tools, of your contracting tools, and all of your rules by the different types of sales users. So it's really creating a horizontal view of your products, a horizontal view of your sales opportunities across your enterprise.
Excellent. And Frank, what's your perspective coming from your visualization?
So for me, I think when I think about it, I think about three different channels, right? So one, you sell by your sales team. That's one thing. Internal people use it. They have a different perspective than your channel partners. Just think about channel partners have their own pricing to it, right? So you have the same configuration, but they have different pricing. So it's a different view. And then you have the e-commerce side where you again, where a customer looks at this, right, and they may look at it differently. They may have a named account or an unnamed account go there, so again, different requirements. And then you have the hybrid that's also named right now with the omni-channel, right, so where you start in one channel. So I first investigate online. There's a lot what millennials do, right? So and I think it's a good thing, honestly. So and I'm not the millennial, right? So so you investigate first online, and then you continue with a different channel afterwards, right? So and there are different hybrid formats. That's what omni-channel means to me.
And John,
for my business, omni-channel is actually very germane and very critical. To me, what it means is being able to actually cover all of the different avenues for which you sell. Within the Prism business, we do direct selling. We also have a very large reseller model. And then, we're also looking into the future some things around e-commerce, self-service. So it's being able to kind of service all of those avenues in our business.
And from the companies I've spoken with about omnichannel, it really is being able to flex for how potential prospects and customers want to buy. And in B2B, it's like a sleeping giant B2B, where it's so pervasive that 82% of B2B buyers now shop on their phones before they actually go out and do direct and indirect procurement. So the time's arrived to be able to flex like that across channels overall. And so when we talk about this ability to flex and build business models that can flex depending on how people want to buy and not locking them into channels, because those days are quickly going away, what are the benefits of deploying Omnichannel? What are some of the things that your customers are saying?
Sure. Well, there's a multitude of benefits when you're talking about omni-channel solutions, and first and foremost is sales productivity. So you really enable multiple sales divisions, if you will, to have similar views into your products and the way that they sell them. So you aren't recreating training for the different sales processes. You aren't recreating different product configurations, right? You're really enabling and allowing them all to have kind of the same view. And then on the back end, you get to really kind of lower the cost of all of those different channels being enabled to sell your products. You don't have to develop a set of pricing tools for one channel versus another. You get to kind of leverage the intelligence of the connections from the front quoting tools to the back office tools across all of your channels, and really improving the quality of your service, your scalability, your ability to create new products and to change your products so that you're more responsive to your market.
Yeah, that's a great point about being able to orchestrate all these different elements within your clients' businesses to be able to deliver a great experience. And then I think, Frank, from your perspective, the benefits, all those elements being orchestrated to be able to really accelerate selling.
Right. So for me, it's really two different perspectives on that one. Right. One is on the sales side, is where you obviously want to have an aligned selling experience. So if I buy via one channel, what's pretty common with larger companies anyway is that you have different tools for different channels, right? So you potentially have different experiences because different teams maintain it, so you have different behavior. From a customer point of view, that's always painful because you go into this experience, you expect a certain behavior and you don't get it. So that's confusing, right? So, to say the least. So you want to have an aligned experience over there, to have the seamless experience. I think that this is generally what you desire. The other one, which is very important, is especially on the maintenance side, right? So now, as I said, lots of companies have multiple configuration tools. So when you do that, that's fine, but everyone requires their own team to maintain it. Right. So if you can reduce this maintenance and at the same point in time have the same selling experience for everyone, that's what you're really shooting for. So therefore, that to me is the aspirational goal of doing that on both sides, sales side and maintenance side.
John, what's your perspective on the benefits?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. First, like Neil mentioned, from a sales productivity perspective, obviously time to quote is critical. You want to provide an optimal customer experience. You also have a better chance of closing the deal if you're one of the first people to quote. So I think being able to have my team very quickly get those quotes out there, or the reseller be able to get those quotes out there, is just by definition critically important. Yeah. That said, what's also important for our business that fits into this is something that I kind of call time to iteration of quote. We sell a combination of hardware and software. The hardware gets built into rooms, and oftentimes we have to change things based on the architecture. Mm-hmm. And so being able to very quickly turn those things around during that sales cycle, not just the initial quote, is critically important. The second one is just being able to have the reps spend more time selling versus having to work with deal desk and quoting. Mm-hmm. So that they can be more productive. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I think, like Frank touched on, just as a customer might actually transcend multiple channels during their life cycle of being your customer, when it comes to renewals or maintenance, we have about 50 products, 250 SKUs. So when something is sold by a reseller and then we might do a cross or upsell directly later down the road, it's important that everything is in sync.
Yeah, those are excellent points, especially with regard to upsell, cross-sell, and then being able to manage to the constraints of a customer, being able to turn the quote around faster, and then being able to close the deal quicker, especially beating out competitors on time alone, which is increasingly more and more important as these tools become more pervasive.
Well, and ultimately you've got, products seem to be getting more and more complex, and their configurability of the products become more and more complex, and when you've got a consistent way of quoting them across all the platforms, you find that you have you can re-leverage things and really reduce the time it takes to create a quote. I mean, in some cases we've taken quote times from 30 minutes to less than 5, because you can really just across all of the channels, just simplify it and make it so much more consistent.
I agree, and you start thinking about moving with that product model, that data model once, and being able to cascade it across all channels. Not only does that speed up and simplify the complexity of the products, but it also gives you the opportunity to onboard people faster.
Absolutely.
And then the churn issues that happen either in marketing or in sales organizations are alleviated because you've got that data there, and it just leads to greater productivity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point. On our next question, what role does visualization play in an omnichannel deployment? Go ahead, and Frank comes out of that world. We'll start with him first.
So it plays a more and more important role, right? So I think it's still a niche part of CPQ, but when you think about all the, when you have a physical product, customers would like to see that, right? So now there's one thing between wanting to see it and being willing to pay for it, right? And right now I think it's still, a lot of customers still struggle to invest that money, but as you can see, we did the recent research study on this one, and we see that many more millennial users especially get interested in this, expect this to happen, right? So now the question is, if you sell these kinds of products, what can you do to address this, right? So, and right now it's mostly 2D is the most prevalent use. Most of the companies who have visualization use some form of 2D. They also attach it usually to their quotes when they have it afterwards. And there is the 3D, obviously, where you can zoom around different parts of the product. You can play around with it. It still has a little bit the stench of engineering, right? Because you have the CAD systems in behind, and you have a lot of data over there that you usually wouldn't want, like the center of gravity. You have some other stuff which is pretty heavy and hard to use in CPQ. So I think, but this is getting a little bit easier, especially since you have now new technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality. You probably saw the HoloLens when you entered the event, right? So these things are coming up. It's still pretty expensive. The HoloLens is like $3,000, right? So not everyone has it. You don't have it a lot of times, but it is becoming, for some industries, it's becoming really key. Think about furniture. We talked as part of the research study that we did to a lot of customers. A bunch of them were also furniture customers, and they expect in 3 to 5 years that this is the standard, right? So it's not an exception. One example that always comes up is, hey, I want to buy this sofa and I want to see if that fits into my home, right? So I want to see the texture. They have certain restrictions where you say, okay, if you're buying a sofa for $15,000, you don't do that online if I have a virtual reality, augmented reality or not, right? But up to a certain degree, I think most were saying around $2,000. Customers are buying this. It becomes more standard. Right now, it's still a lot of customers do it because they want to wow their customers. Hey, you do something nobody else does. But it will become standard, and it becomes standard in more and more industries. Right now, I had some interesting examples that I didn't even think about before. Stuff that you probably know is a yacht, high luxury cars. You want to see that, and for some of these cars, you can buy it. It will take 3 months. They will show you how the car is built. You get updates until you get the car, and it has to match 100%. So very different use cases for that one. And there are some. And you have, like, for surgeries, doctors, when they do surgeries, they have, for example, you need to wait for dead bodies to do that, and then you can do the surgery with augmented reality. So it's going across a lot of different areas, and even though it's a niche right now, I would expect that this becomes much more used going forward if they address the visual asset creation. Right now, that's taking too much time, makes it too expensive. But going forward, if that's addressed, it should become much more useful for more industries.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. John, I think in your business, visualization must be absolutely key.
Yes, it is, and I mean, it ultimately comes down to what's working and what's not working. And so, as I mentioned before, we've got a large set of products, an even larger number of SKUs. We have software, hardware, installation, support, services for software, services for hardware, and then we have a direct and a partner model. And so being able to have visibility into what bundles of products are working together, which partners are effectively selling which products, which products our own salespeople are able to directly sell effectively. It's just critically important to have that, and the visualization gives us that insight.
Absolutely, and the ability to define the value proposition and be able to look at it from a systemic perspective, and then be able to close a deal by being able to inspire trust with a complete quote, and then I'm sure you can tie back and provide available to promise and delivery dates and pretty much seal the deal right there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. I mean, we have to obviously deal with things like shipping and physical infrastructure with our business, and so having that data visualization. Obviously, margins are different between hardware and software, so it's also important to get some insight there too. Yes. So absolutely.
Great. What are your insights on how your clients are running on visualization?
To be perfectly honest, I just haven't had the opportunity to run into that yet, but seeing what I was playing with on the the HoloLenses and stuff like that, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, I agree. And so, what are some of the mistakes companies can avoid? What are the cautionary tales about configuration? And all of you have served many customers, so I'm sure you've got some great examples.
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, I think trying to recreate an environment that's like the one that you're replacing. So a lot of times customers want to say, well, we did it this way before and we want to do it this way again. And I think what they're trying to do in a lot of cases is put a square peg in a round hole. You're getting a new tool with more power, that's more innovative. And what you have to do is look at your processes, and you got to look at your products and define them in a way that works more closely to the tool that you're buying and gives you the benefits of those tools that you're deploying. So, not being willing to change the way you work and to change the way you do things a little bit, to leverage the products that you're buying. And then, of course, also there's always trying to, the connectivity between the front end and the back end, tools that you're actually quoting in, that's really where you want to put a lot of the intelligence. You don't want to continue to go back to these back-end offices and get data all the time or follow the rules from the back-end systems. You want to push all that intelligence up front to increase your productivity and the speed of the tool. And then it also makes it a lot more maintainable, as opposed to have all of these threads to back-end systems that you really only need data from, or you need to push data to. So I think those are the ones that I see the most of.
Yeah, it's excellent. Looking at the blockers of speed, scale, and simplicity of putting together a complete solution and being able to hit it across all channels and be able to measure the overall performance.
In one shot.
Yeah, great. Frank, what are some of your insights on the customer?
So for me, the key one is being prepared before you start an implementation, right? So what I see, customers are very excited about having a tool, wanted to implement it, but the process are not clear, the change management has not been defined, lots of open questions before you get started. You usually waste a lot of time and money by not being prepared and having to do that while the team is on site. So I would suggest putting a little bit of work up front in there before you make a decision, before you start the implementation, just to be prepared.
Great. And John, what are some of your insights with regard to?
I think these guys hit the nail on the head. I think it's all about, going into it, don't have a completely preconceived notion of exactly how you want it to work. Take into consideration the expertise of who you're working with, and Apttus, and then also introduce a little bit of flexibility, and then have a plan, I think, to scale into it. I think, sometimes people get a little too rigid on the workflows out of the gate, and then they get a system that is so constrained, they get a revolt from the users. Get the products in there, get the process working, kind of warm it up, and then I think have an iterative plan to make it more sophisticated over time.
Absolutely, and one of the most fascinating aspects of that is putting software and hardware SKUs on the same PO and being able to ship that and then be able to actually define it within the customer constraints and being agile enough to do that.
Exactly, that as well as even just for us internally from a kind of a rev rec and finance perspective, being able to break all that apart.
Definitely. Yeah. Great. And how do you recommend a company get started with an omni-channel project? And maybe, John, we could start with you.
So what I would say is, I think it kind of ties back to our previous question. Start reasonably.
Yeah.
I would also say try to probably leverage as much commonality in the beginning as possible, and then as you get the system up and running and you get usage and you get some data visualization and some analytics, then I would suggest start to introduce what needs to be tweaked for the specific channels over time. But you never know what it's going to be like until you're in the middle of it, so you just have to have that flexibility.
Absolutely. Thanks. Frank, what are your insights?
So for me, it's mostly what we recommend is you spend at least 2 days getting all the stakeholders in a room, right? Get them prepared to tell everyone, okay, so what does that really entail? So who is going to be involved? What is everyone's role? What can you expect? What should you know? So how can you prepare for this project? So we have a 2-day workshop that we usually do for this one to get started at the minimum.
Excellent.
When we get started with a project, what we like to do is really be as inclusive as possible too, right? You want to have feedback from all the different stakeholders, and you've got an executive sponsor, and you've got the person who's going to, really try and see and glean the benefits from this project. But you have to really know, why are you doing this? What is your goal for what you're doing, right? What are you trying to accomplish? And make sure you're inclusive to all the different stakeholders. You don't want to leave out the people who are using the tool for the sake of the IT people who are, you're trying to collapse the tool for, right?
Sure.
So I think inclusivity, and you guys touched on in the last questions around, iterative development and being willing to look and say, okay, we're going to do our main sales force first, and then we'll bring on our partners, and then we'll go to our directly to our customers in the e-commerce way, and do it in an iterative fashion, so you can kind of build on the base, as opposed to trying to deliver it all at once for one and then deliver it all a second time for the next group, and generally you've got to really build that base across and then stair step it up.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think the one thing that I've seen that pays off more than anything else is start out with a business strategy and a business need, and being pain-based business needs, where it's so compelling that you have to move forward with some type of integration of quote to cash or CPQ into a broader omni-channel strategy. That's obviously the direction that we've gone in the last few minutes in the discussion. But starting with a really compelling business need that galvanizes senior management around the objective and gets them to have skin in the game, quite frankly, and then start to put the metrics together, pilot it, and then be able to drive to revenue on that. And that makes all the difference in the world. I'm involved in a project right now that's comparable to what John does, which is putting hardware and software SKUs on the same product. Microsoft wants to be able to sell a tablet and have a completely configurable Windows 10 download going off of a Wi-Fi network. And so that really is the need there. The overwhelming need at Microsoft is kickstart Windows 10 sales. And so that is an aspect of Omnichannel. They're realizing that traditional channels that they've relied on are no longer there, and that they have to flex to be able to meet the needs of how people want to buy. And then in closing, we have about a minute left. The market's awash with stats, and I'm a big fan of stats. You can tell from the way I write on Forbes that I love stats. And what you can see overall is, there's all these indicators of majority of retention rate, the majority of movement. But the bottom line is that Omnichannel is delivering business value today. And a speaker previously to Ken here in this venue talked about the need to deliver overwhelming value. And with Omnichannel, you correlate excellent customer experiences across how and why people want to buy and when with the architecture to provide that. And it's a rare company today that will make the hard decisions about realigning IT architecture to be able to meet customer expectations. But when they do, all kinds of goodness happens with regard to driving greater revenue, increasing customer sat, driving up NPS, Net Promoter Score, and other metrics like that. So with that, I think we are now right at 15 seconds. So thank you, John. Thank you, Neil. Thanks, Frank. Great. And thank you all. So if you have any questions, you can see me after the presentation. Thank you. Yeah.